Guys, like, I don't even know how to begin. I was gonna make a video talking about the latest Grand Prix stages, but no. Instead, we have to cover, say it with me, Russian buffoonery. But actually, good updates, I think. I don't know. Basically, as we've all heard, WADA, the World Anti-Doping Organization, is requesting from CAS, or suggesting from CAS, the Court of Arbitration for Sport, that they ban Kamila Valieva for 4 years because of the positive doping. And this does not mean that this is going to happen. They're just really strongly suggesting it to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, CAS, who is now taking over the case because Trusova has taken way too damn long trying to make anything happen. And by anything, they mean nothing, because as we all saw in the last video, Trusova announced in an announcement that there will be no more announcements because they were going to try and keep the privacy of Kamila Valieva. And WADA literally was like, F that. They named her by name. They said no privacy. We all know who it is. We all know why you're delaying it. They really said to Kamila Valieva, what's good? They feel so just at the end of the rope. And I can't blame them, because having Kamila Valieva just running around without any repercussions, remember, the Russian ban has nothing to do with the doping. It is strictly politically about the war. Having Kamila Valieva be basically without a single consequence, without a single punishment, without a single anything for having a positive doping test at the Olympics makes him look like a freaking fool. Like, Kamila Valieva not only got to perform at the Olympics, but then was turned into this national hero in Russia. And the only reason she's not competing right now, because she wouldn't be allowed to compete, is because of the Russian ban due to the war. So literally, virtually no punishment has been given on this girl for the positive test, and no punishment, it seems, will be given to any of the adults involved around, allegedly involved around. But we're gonna get into it a little bit more later in the video, because since I am not covering the Grand Prix and the general competitions, I thought we could just, do a little tea talk between the girls, the gays, and the theys, and the few straight men that are here. Hey, what's up? So I thought we could talk about a couple of things. The first thing I want to talk about is some Alexia Paganini tea. If you don't know who Alexia Paganini is, she is a figure skater that represents, I believe, to be Sweden? Nope, got that wrong. Switzerland. I always confuse those two. She is a Swiss figure skater. Although she, I believe, is American and skates in New York City, she represents Switzerland. And apparently, I can't speak through my own very experience, she posted a TikTok that kind of alluded to her being fed up with the Russian girls being overscored time and time again in those competitions in the past when they were still allowed to skate, due to just their high technical elements, or maybe just the powerful camp that they come from, pulling the strings behind the scenes. I, like I said, did not see this TikTok video, but I saw a lot of discourse about it in figure skating Twitter. A lot of people talking about how she shouldn't have used certain words, a lot of people defending her, saying she wasn't calling the skaters that specific word, but maybe was calling the coaches that. But from what I can gather from the streets of figure skating Twitter, definitely what was said is that there was just a frustration about the Russian ladies being overscored. And I understand that. And I really don't know what to comment about it, but it is an interesting conversation to have, because I see a lot of people talking about hypocrisy in terms of how we're treating Ilia Malinin, because the quad axel essentially gives him the first place on a golden plate, literally along with a golden medal, and how a lot of Americans are talking about Ilia Malinin is saying that he's pushing the sport forward. He is bringing us to a new modern reality that we didn't even know was possible, humanly possible, legitimately, because he is doing a quad axel, which many thought to be as impossible as a quintuple jump. And the way that we're talking about it is the same way that I believe the Russians were talking about Russian girls, in terms of how their scores were valid because they are pushing the sport forward. Like with Trusova, who in the same case as Ilia Malinin lacked a lot of the artistic side of the sport, she gained hell of a lot in technical by landing all the quad jumps that had never been done by women, with the exception of course, the quad axel. And so she definitely pushed the sport forward, but the difference between Ilia Malinin and Alexandra Trusova, while they might seem like a very similar case, is that Ilia Malinin at 17 is at the beginning of his career. Unless he has a very nasty injury, God forbid, he will definitely continue for at least a good 5 to 6 years. Meanwhile, the Russian girls, due to the technique that they use to get these incredible, almost impossible jumps, is through just malnourishment and a lot of under rotation that they don't count on in this point, which brings back to Alexia Paganini's point, where these girls were very heavily rewarded, yes, but it wasn't always the girls who were pushing the sport forward, like Alexandra Trusova. It was other girls who were constantly under rotating, but still quote unquote landing the jump, and therefore were given high scores that we all saw also had what we call the Atari bubble, because as soon as Alexandra Trusova leaves Atari, as soon as Evgenia Valieva left Atari, the scores would deflate. So it wasn't always due to their incredible achievements. It was a lot of times political, but figure skating is a political sport. However, going back to Ilia Malinin comparison, if we look at this chart, which was put together by Sports.ru, a Russian site, where I think it only included the girls who they believe are done with the sport, so I don't know why Elizaveta Tuktemisheva is included. They didn't include Alexandra Trusova, although she would be right alongside Aliona and Sherbakova in the years that they've lasted in the sport. We see that Elizaveta Tuktemisheva has been here since 2011. That is 11 years of being a senior lady, and we see it steadily decrease because the Atari methods, the Atari girls which start popping up and cropping up post 2015, start having shorter and shorter and shorter careers. Evgenia Medvedeva had 5, which seems like hell of a lot of senior cycles, senior seasons to have when you compare it to the most recent crop of girls to have ended their skating careers, essentially, which is Anna Sherbakova and Anna Kostornaya. And we can see the decrease of career years. There is no denying that this Atari method technique for quad jumps is ruining the longevity of ladies and changing the way that we view the ladies. We are putting more of an emphasis on technicality and less on performance. And one camp, the Atari camp, which their main star was just caught for doping, keep that in mind, are the only ones who are consistently landing these jumps. Wonder what is in the water. Let's just say that. So there's a big difference between Ilia Malinin landing a quad axel in the beginning of his career, where we definitely see him getting to 2026 and beyond, just based on stats, based on facts that men just have a longer longevity and they can just sustain these jumps and these pressures on their joints. And while his technique might not be perfect, and God knows his artistry is definitely not where it needs to be, he does remind us of a young Nathan Chen who will grow into some sort of artistic presence. Like I said, his short is starting to grow on me. I think it's the most we've seen him perform it in terms of theatrics and campiness and everything, and just getting into the groove of stuff. So Ilia Malinin, we don't expect him to have a 3-year career. Meanwhile, it has been statistically proven by literally a Russian press media that the technique, the pushing beyond the limits, the trying and killing yourself over to get a quad through the wrong methods of malnourishment and over-rotation of your back, which leads to injuries, like ankle injuries, knee injuries, freaking broken arms, if we talk to Aliona Kostornaya, it's different. The more I could compare it to would be that Ilia Malinin is now talking about jumping a quint. I would strongly suggest against it. If his parents start pushing him, who are his coaches, start pushing him to land a quint, then I would say we are seeing the exact same thing that is happening with Alexandra Trusova if the way to a quint is malnourishment and improper technique. I don't believe pushing yourself to the limit just to say that you are the first is enough to justify having essentially a spark of a career, not even a full Olympic cycle. I mean, Anna Sherbakova and Aliona Kostornaya, 3 years. That's all they had. Medvedeva, 5. Elizaveta Tuktemisheva, which is the only non-Atari girl that is still competitive at that high level and was in the mix for the Olympics. 11 years, the only non-Atari girl. So there's a lot more things to argument in terms of why Ilia Malinin pushing the sport is something that we should celebrate, but we need to keep an eye out for those warning signs, those red flags that could very much parallel the Tutberidze camp. Also, Ilia Malinin does not come from a camp. It comes from his mother and his father, who are also his coaches. So it's not like we're perpetuating and validating a school of thought and perpetuating the change of an entire discipline like Atari camp did with the ladies. It's different. So there is a big difference, and I don't think there's hypocrisy in cheering on for Ilia Malinin and saying that he is pushing the boundaries of sports, because he truly is doing that. And I believe that people weren't looking at Alexandra Trusova and her Russian rocket revolutionizing the ladies field in terms of technicality, I don't think people were looking at it so cynically when she first started. It was later on that we were seeing her fall into the inevitable pattern of the Atari expiration date that people started to freak out. So Ilia, Malinin, and Alexandra Trusova, I can make a more in-depth video talking about that, but let's leave that for another day. Finally, the reason you guys are all here, Jesus Christ, people, it seems finally consequences are going to come to the Russians for having this 15-year-old girl be doping at the Olympics. In short, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, has officially referred the case of Kamila Valieva to CAS, which is the Court of Arbitration for Sport. CAS is the same people who did the first trial during the Olympics, where they decided that because she was a protected person, she was still going to be allowed to perform at the Olympics. But that if she landed on the podium, nobody was going to get their medals. That is why Japan and Team USA have yet to receive their medals for the team event, because the Russians, with the help of Kamila Valieva, landed in first place. And because WADA has taken so damn long investigating on their end and just essentially stalling, making announcements that are not announcements, not putting forth any kind of real results, just whispers that the team doctor has now been banned, which is not a surprise because it's already been banned in the past for doping. So him taking the fall is barely even a fall. Point is that officially WADA put out a strong statement. This is the strongest action we've seen taken against Kamila Valieva's positive doping test, where they request that CAS ban Kamila Valieva for 4 years, and this is the really big one, also nullify, completely void, take away any accomplishment medals or titles that she has done after having tested positive in the original doping test. So if that wasn't clear enough, I'm going to read a tweet by Christine Brennan, who has been covering the case since the very second it exploded back in Beijing. She says, "More news in the Kamila Valieva saga, and it's big. The World Anti-Doping Agency asked the Court of Arbitration for Sport to find Kamila Valieva guilty of doping, seeking a 4-year ban and disqualification of all her results from December 25th of 2021, which was the date that she tested positive, the day that they actually took the doping test, onward, including the Beijing Olympic team gold. This means, based on that date, that her titles, the Olympic team gold, the gold medal at Russian nationals, and the gold medal at Europeans would all be taken away and given, of course, to the person next. A lot of the funny commentary from Twitter also says that they can't believe that this would also make Anna Shcherbakova not only Olympic champion and 3-time national champion in Russia, but also the European champion. The Shcherbakova power of will is the strongest shit I've ever seen. She is the manifestation queen. She can freaking arrange the stars and the ecosystem. I trust Anna Shcherbakova to have a good, long, successful life because my God, my God. And actually, the Russian nationals titles is a little bit muddy in terms of whether she'll be able to keep it or not, because although the competition began on December 23rd, which is before the December 25th date, which was when the doping test was taken, the competition actually ended on the 26th, which is after the 25th, if you know how numbers work, and that is when the medals were actually given. So because she was given the medal towards the end of the competition, the 26th, that title would also be null. It would be revoked from her. If, of course, CAS were to take WADA's punishment suggestions and make them real. Let's see how this actually would work. Here is the actual statement from the Court of Arbitration for Sport in regards to how this trial will go down. And believe me, the Russians will fight tooth and nail to make sure Kamila Valieva keeps her medal, because they talk about Kamila Valieva like she is freaking Olympic champion because she has become such a symbol of Russian pride. But here it is, the official statement from CAS. I'm not going to read this entire thing. You can pause to read. However, I am going to read where they state what they want, what they're seeking for a ruling, and also how the proceedings of this trial will actually work. So, second to last paragraph if you want to read along. WADA seeks a ruling from CAS that the athlete committed as an ADRV, which I believe is the protected athlete, pursuant to Article 4.1 or 4.2 of the RUSADA ADR, that the athlete be sanctioned with a 4 period of ineligibility starting on the date on which CAS awards enters into force, as well as the disqualification of all competitive results obtained by her from and including the date of December 25th, 2021, with all the resulting consequences, including forfeiture of medals, points, and prizes. This would not only take away her points, it would take away her standing. Like, this would completely erase her first and only senior season because they're still freaking banned. Like, she hasn't had any more competitions beside that one slight sliver when the Russians were allowed to compete when she turned senior. So she would be taken away from her medals, her points, anything, including, I think, even monetary prize. Anyways, the next paragraph will cover how the trial proceedings will actually proceed. The CAS arbitration proceedings have commenced. In accordance with the Code of Sport-Related Arbitration, the arbitration rules governing CAS procedures. The parties will first exchange written submissions and participate in the appointment of a 3-member panel of arbitrators that will decide the matter. These are the 3 people who will decide everything. WADA will nominate 1 member of the panel, so one person who's definitely not going to be for Kamila, and RUSADA and the athlete will jointly nominate another, someone who will probably be for Kamila. The 3rd member, the president of the panel, will be appointed by the president of the CAS Appeals Division or her deputy. We don't know where this person is going to stand. And that is the person who's going to decide the future of Kamila and everything relating to this doping case. Once appointed, the panel will issue procedural directions for the next phase of the proceedings, including the holding of a hearing. Following the hearing, the panel will deliberate and issue an arbitral award containing its decision and the grounds for it. So they will make a decision on Kamila's case. At this time, it is not possible to indicate a time frame from the issuance of the decision. So we don't know when it's going to happen. The CAS's panel decision will be final and binding, with the exception of the party's right to file an appeal to the Swiss Federal Tribunal within 30 days of the very limited procedural grounds. So the Russians might get consequences out of this if they were to side with WADA's suggestion of punishments. The Russians, RUSADA, can still file another appeal, and this can be an ongoing legal battle forever if they wish, I think. But they would need evidence, they would need reason for the appeal. And the main reason they used for the first appeal was to test the B sample, which, as we all know, probably also tested positive for doping, which is why now WADA is losing their patience. They made no announcement, and everybody kind of knows that Kamila's been caught. She's been caught in 4K, in 4K, in 4K, in 4K. And yeah, and then it just tells you a chronological events of what happened. And yet, there is still no date about when this will be handled. But it's not looking good for Kamila. I predict, and I am careful with my predictions because apparently I got many predictions right. I predicted that something big was going to happen. Something big was going to come out regarding Kamila's case. This to me is another proof that the B sample was definitely also contaminated, was also positive for doping, which is why WADA was like, enough is enough. This is making WADA look ridiculous because the biggest case of doping since, the state-run doping, which the only slap on the wrist that Russia got was the fact that they still to this day cannot compete with their flag. This is another bite to the hand that feeds them. This is another situation that makes WADA look ridiculous and look like they don't do anything, that they're just there as a figurehead but don't actually keep doping from happening. And so they, I think, are really going to try and make Kamila an example. And I think Russia, in order to get back into the good graces of the Olympic Committee, will let Kamila take the fall. They will make an example out of Kamila, and they will let Kamila be the scapegoat, not just for Russia and all the future athletes that they want to keep in the Olympics, for the Russians to look good on the world stage, their soft power that they want to hold over the people. They put a lot of state money into sports, so they want to keep that train going. Not only are they going to make Kamila an example and allow WADA to make Kamila an example, I think they're also going to use Kamila as a scapegoat for all the adults involved that could be involved in the doping, because this child did not find 3 separate heart medications on her own. They were definitely, I would guess, given to her. Not just by the team doctor, but approved and maybe also given physically by any other adult related. Anyone in her camp, which could include her coaches, parents could also be aware. Like, where do you put the blame? And the reality is that it should be put on the adults that are keeping the system going. That are saying, you are the chosen one, therefore we're going to pump you with all the drugs. So much so that they couldn't pass the test. Because if they are doing this with all the girls, Kamila was given so many that it just couldn't be hid. Or maybe the surprise visit was genuinely surprise. Although there has been a lot of talk about visits being told in advance to certain high status athletes so that they can be prepared and test negatively for doping. Regardless, no one in Team Tulberice is going to take a fall, and not only that, they're going to heavily distance themselves. I believe that as soon as Kamila is made the scapegoat, Eteri is going to stand by her side by 0.5 seconds, and as soon as Kamila is banned from skating, Eteri will never utter her name again. Unless asked to do so. I don't think they have any loyalty to the child. I think they will be more than happy to make Kamila just the collateral damage in the greater mission of Russia being the best in figure skating. And if they have to throw somebody under the bus to do it, they're more than happy to. That's what I believe. But yeah, that is the craziness that I've seen. A lot of Russian buffoonery going down. I'm gonna have to cover the Grand Prix in the next video, and hopefully I'll talk to you guys soon. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. There is a lot of food for thought in this video, more than usual. And as always, shout out to Corina, Katie, Leslie, Natalia, and Timothy. Thank you all for the support. Twitter, merch, and Patreon are all down below. And I will talk to you guys soon. Bye bye.